This report just opened a very interesting door for the Islanders, as a former fan favorite player has been placed on waivers, and the reason why this is so worth noting is this player plays a position of weakness for the Islanders. The third pair of the defense, in particular the left side of the third pair, has been a wreck all season long, ever since Romanov left with injury, and even then he was starting to find his game, but he had not quite hit on all cylinders either. This is a defense that is starting to give up the most scoring chances in the slot in the NHL, and this third pair is a big part of it, which is why this player is a really interesting player to consider claiming off waivers. It's Nick Leddy. Everybody knows who Nick Leddy is. The name, I think, is the most attractive part of this move, which is something you have to be cautious of, because while I know everybody's remembering Nick Leddy and what he contributed to the Islanders, remember when he left, he was not quite the player he was when he came. He had taken a step back with age, and Father Time has continued to do his thing in the years where Nick Leddy has no longer played for the Islanders. At this point, he is a fringe third pair defenseman, and the issue is he is making $4 million per year. Now, this is the last year of that contract, which is why I will say I am open to this. A lot of times I shut down these ideas for the Islanders to acquire players worth a ton of money right away. I am open to this, and we're going to explain why a little bit more on this episode of Islanders Digest, but the short of why is he's averaging 17 minutes and 30 seconds per game. And when you compare that to the other left-handed defensemen on the third pair the Islanders have tried so far, none of them have been able to play past 10 without Patrick Waugh really losing all faith. So for the Islanders, at the very least, this would be something that would be more comfortable. Now, it also would come with drawbacks. And before we get to that, this video is brought to you by Kalshi. When you download Kalshi using the link below and enter code DIGESTNHL, you will get $20 when you trade your first 100. Kalshi is the largest prediction market in the United States. On their platform, you can trade yes, no on real-life events, sports, elections, and pretty much everything. If you're in California, Texas, New York, or anywhere across the country, Kalshi is live in all 50 states. For sports fans, trade on game outcomes, player performances, or playoff chances, all on a regulated market where you can cash out at any time. For example, the Islanders are playing Vancouver tonight. You can trade on them for 58 cents. That means if you trade $100 on the Islanders winning this game, then you can get 168. Now, I would be a little weary with this just because the Islanders have been so bad against bad teams. Sorry, they've been great against good teams. They've been awful against bad teams. However, you can also trade on the football playoffs. And this is a big story. New England are huge favorites over the Denver Broncos. The Broncos quarterback Bo Nix is out for the season after breaking his ankle. Absolutely brutal. So if you think there's a good chance New England is going to be the Broncos without their quarterback, then you can trade on it. You can also trade on Denver if you really don't want the New England Patriots to win, especially for you Jets fans. I understand you really don't want that to happen. And finally, you can also trade on first goal scorer and other props like that, goals, touchdowns. It is not just full game outcomes. It's genuinely a smarter way to use your sports knowledge, and you can close positions whenever you want. Download Kalshi with the link in the description and use code DIGESTNHL to get $20 when you trade your first 100. Thank you to Kalshi for sponsoring this video. Now, talking back about Nick Leddy, we have to take a look at the stats just so I can really express how much this is no longer the same Nick Leddy we used to know in his last season with the Islanders, which was really 4 to 5 years ago at this point. He had 31 points, was still an offensive force for the Islanders, so controlling power play, things like that. Since then, it has been a while. He was still pretty decent for the Detroit Red Wings, had a good 2 years for the St. Louis Blues, but now that he's on the Sharks, he is really struggling to play. You can look, the difference in his play is staggering, and this season he is a -9. This is not a solution that is going to be a home run. He's 34 years old now. Again, this is going to cost $4 million if they claim him, but if the Islanders aren't considering making some other big moves, I really don't hate the idea of bringing in Nick Leddy. For one, a lot of comments in my previous video talk about why I didn't want the Islanders to acquire Rasmus Andersson to improve the right side of the defense. We're talking about how they want the Islanders to really make a big move so they can really show confidence in the locker room and really give them a reward for playing so well this season. I understand that sentiment. The issue there was when you're trading a first-round pick, stuff like that, just to give the locker room a win, that can be really expensive. Nick Leddy, being that he already has experience with a lot of the older players on this team, could do a similar thing to this Islanders locker room, really bring them up without the cost other than the money. And the Islanders aren't looking to make a major acquisition, and I think this is something they definitely should consider. Now, looking at the left side of the defense, at least with Nick Leddy, he plays the left side, and he's much more reliable than a player like McWard or all these other players from Bridgeport they brought up who really don't have a lot of NHL experience. The one exception I will bring here is Isaiah George, and at the very least, the Islanders should see what Isaiah George has in the NHL before they pick up a player like Leddy. I know he's only on waivers for 24 hours. Believe me, the Sharks put that contract on waivers. They have no issue if a team claims it. I'm sure if the Islanders come in 3 weeks and say, hey, we tried out Isaiah George, didn't quite work out, the Sharks would be willing to make a trade. And we're going to talk about trade in just a second. A trade might make more sense in this scenario for the Islanders. But what Stefan Rosser says here, which is a really good point, and I really believe at this point, he thinks that the Islanders' plan is to give Isaiah George a shot when they return from their homestand. Now, notably, Isaiah George has had an up and down season this year in Bridgeport. He has looked really good, especially defensively, but he has not been healthy. Now he's currently getting back into the flow of things. It makes sense for the Islanders not to call him up and rush him all the way to Vancouver right now. But when they come home, when they play Buffalo, at that point, Isaiah George would have had 7 or so games in the AHL to really get himself back into the field of things. And then it really makes sense to give this player a shot. I really believed in Isaiah George last year. He played 33 games for the Islanders and looked pretty serviceable. I think long-term, he is the solution, and really, he deserves a shot. The other players that the Islanders have had step up, yes, I think they, in their own way, all had their own decent performances. But with Isaiah George, there's a higher ceiling there, and at this point, more of an expectation that he is going to be an NHL player. With how well he played last season, how he continues to work on his game, Isaiah George has a lot of potential to become a defensive defenseman, and that defensive defenseman part is very clear because the Islanders' issue with this unit, while of course you can use decent breakouts, and Isaiah George does provide that as well, perhaps not to Nick Leddy's level in his prime, but what Isaiah George does bring that the other options don't is he has a step up defensively. He's good at his skating, and he's only going to get better as time goes on. So these other options the Islanders have brought up are a bit older. Isaiah George has more room to run with things, and it makes sense for the Islanders to see what he looks like before they pick up a player like Nick Leddy. But with Nick Leddy, I think if Isaiah George does not work out, this is an option I think the Islanders should go for. Now, one interesting option here is, we don't know if this is the case, but sometimes when a player Nick Leddy's age does get sent down, they don't want to go down. You have a family, all these things. You don't want to be riding the bus in the AHL. There's a small chance that Nick Leddy decides for the last year of his contract, it does not quite make sense to play in the AHL, and he'd be willing to waive the last year of his contract, really cancel things with the Sharks to pursue a new opportunity in the NHL where he can play in the pros. In that case, 100% I think the Islanders should sign Nick Leddy. The difference there would be, instead of paying $4 million for this player, you'd be getting him for, I would assume, to be a league minimum contract. That would make absolute sense. Even if he doesn't play every night, all it takes is one more injury on this defense for things to get completely derailed. This is a player who's played with Scott Mayfield well in the past, and Scott Mayfield is not an easy player to play with, so that's notable. I like the idea. The challenge I'm really dealing with here, so I keep on pressing the wrong buttons, is I'm trying to weigh the Nick Leddy of my heart, a player I really like, and just the numbers that are here. And it's challenging because Nick Leddy was a flawed defenseman in his prime. He's a very flawed defenseman now. The question is he better than what the Islanders have and what they're willing to pay for? And considering the price is free, the answer is yes. So I think with this, it makes sense to give Isaiah George the shot first, because if Isaiah George wins that job, then you have no need for Nick Leddy and you can save the $4 million. But at this point, if Isaiah George comes up and he looks like he's not quite ready, it makes sense for the Islanders to go in the Nick Leddy direction, at least in my opinion. I'd love to know what you think about this in the comments below. That's going to do it for this episode of Islanders Digest. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.